For almost 2 years, the people back home believed I was gone forever. They cried for me, held memorial dinners, and spoke about me like I was nothing more than a memory. The worst part was knowing the person behind all of it was my own sister. Bryn looked everyone in the eye and convinced them I was dead while she stepped into the life I should have still been living. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I never imagined someone raised beside me could betray me that deeply. We grew up in the same house, shared the same family dinners, and promised each other we would always stay close after our parents passed away. I believed her every time she smiled at me. I trusted her even when small things started feeling wrong between us. By the time I realized what she was truly capable of, everything I owned was already slipping away. My name disappeared from records. My savings were gone. Even people I loved stopped looking for me because they thought there was nothing left to find. While Bryn played the grieving sister in our hometown, I was surviving quietly hundreds of miles away, trying to stay invisible and rebuild myself from nothing. I worked long shifts at a small roadside hotel, kept my head down, and avoided questions about my past. Then one ordinary evening changed everything. An older woman walked into the diner area, stared at me for several seconds, and slowly whispered my name like she had seen a ghost. That moment shattered the lie my sister had spent years creating, and from there, her perfect world finally began to crack. Growing up, Bryn knew exactly how to make people love her. She remembered birthdays, helped neighbors carry groceries, and always spoke with a calm voice that made everyone feel comfortable around her. In our town, people described her as thoughtful and dependable. Teachers praised her. Older couples at church adored her. Even my friends trusted her more than they trusted me sometimes. What nobody saw was the version of Bryn that appeared behind closed doors. She liked controlling every part of my life. If I bought something for myself, she questioned whether I deserved it. If I made friends, she found ways to turn them against me. She constantly acted like she knew better than everyone else, especially me. I spent years believing I was the difficult sister because that's what Bryn wanted me to think. After our parents died, things became colder between us. Their loss hit me hard, and I could barely handle the grief. Meanwhile, Bryn focused on paperwork, finances, and the future of our family lodge in Colorado. That place meant everything to me because our parents built it from nothing. I thought Bryn wanted to protect it too. Then the will was read. Our father had divided ownership equally between us. The moment Bryn heard that, something changed in her face. She stayed quiet in front of the lawyer, but later that night she exploded at me. She said I wasn't responsible enough to own half the property and claimed our parents only included me out of pity. From that point on, every conversation turned tense. She pressured me to sign documents I barely understood and kept insisting the lodge would fail unless she had full control. I refused because it was the last piece of my parents I still had. Looking back now, I think that was the moment Bryn stopped seeing me as her sister and started seeing me as an obstacle standing between her and the life she wanted. The last clear memory I had before everything fell apart was standing in the lodge kitchen during a snowstorm while Bryn shouted at me across the room. She wanted me to agree to a deal with a developer who planned to tear down most of the property and replace it with luxury cabins. I refused immediately. That lodge carried my parents' memories in every corner, and I couldn't watch strangers destroy it for profit. Bryn lost her temper in a way I had never seen before. She accused me of ruining her future and said I was too emotional to make important decisions. I grabbed my coat and left because I couldn't stand listening to her anymore. After that, things become blurry. I remember driving down an icy road late at night. I remember headlights coming toward me too fast. Then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a hospital bed with heavy pain running through my body. Machines beeped around me, and my head felt foggy. I tried asking questions, but every answer seemed confusing. Bryn sat beside me acting calm and caring, telling me I needed rest and that doctors were handling everything. Days passed, but I wasn't allowed visitors. Anytime I asked for my phone or wanted to contact someone, Bryn had an excuse ready. She claimed people needed space to grieve because the accident had been serious. At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. Then one nurse accidentally called me by a name I had never heard before. That's when panic hit me. I slowly realized my records had been changed. Bryn had moved me into a rehabilitation center far from home using false information while telling the town I hadn't survived the crash. While I was recovering in isolation, she stepped into complete control of our parents' property, finances, and business affairs without anyone questioning her story. The rehabilitation center sat far outside a small town surrounded by empty fields and quiet roads. Most days felt exactly the same. Nurses came in and out, medications were handed to patients on schedule, and the windows stayed locked. At first, I kept believing there had been some terrible mistake that would soon be corrected. I thought eventually someone from home would show up asking questions. Nobody ever came. Weeks turned into months, and the truth became impossible to ignore. I had no phone, no wallet, no driver's license, and no access to my accounts. Whenever I asked staff members for help, they treated me carefully, like I was confused or unstable. Someone had already prepared a story about me before I even arrived there. Bryn visited every few weeks wearing soft sweaters and carrying fake concern on her face. In front of employees, she acted like the loving sister doing her best to care for a troubled family member. The moment we were alone, her entire expression changed. She warned me not to cause problems. She said people back home had already accepted my death and moved on. According to her, nobody would listen to a woman with memory issues living inside a rehabilitation facility. She kept repeating that if I fought her, I would only embarrass myself and make things worse. The hardest part wasn't even the fear. It was the loneliness. I spent nights staring at the ceiling wondering how an entire town could stop searching for me so quickly. Friends I had known my whole life never questioned anything. No one noticed I was gone. It felt like my existence had been erased without leaving behind a trace. Little by little, I stopped recognizing myself. I barely spoke to other patients. I stopped looking in mirrors because the tired woman staring back at me didn't feel real anymore. Bryn had taken my home, my identity, and my future so completely that some days I almost believed her when she said I no longer mattered to anyone outside those walls. One night, heavy rain slammed against the windows while thunder shook the building hard enough to cut the electricity for a few minutes. Staff members rushed through the halls trying to calm patients and restart equipment. For the first time since arriving there, the place felt distracted. Chaotic. Unprepared. I realized it might be the only chance I would ever get. Another patient named Nora had become friendly with me over time. She was older, quiet, and far more aware than the staff believed. Earlier that evening, she noticed how nervous I looked and asked what was wrong. When I finally admitted I wanted to leave, she didn't question me. She simply opened a small drawer beside her bed and handed me folded cash she had secretly saved. I still remember her words before I left. "If you stay here, you disappear." I borrowed a hoodie and sweatpants from the laundry room, slipped through a side exit during the storm, and kept walking until my legs nearly gave out. I expected alarms or security guards behind me at any second, but nobody came. For weeks, I moved from bus stations to cheap motels, avoiding places connected to Colorado. I paid in cash whenever possible and used fake explanations about my past. Fear followed me everywhere. Every stranger felt dangerous. Every unfamiliar car made me think Bryn had somehow tracked me down. Eventually, I reached a small highway town in New Mexico where travelers stopped overnight before continuing west. The place barely appeared on maps, which made it feel safe. A worn roadside hotel near the interstate had a help wanted sign hanging in the window. The owner, Mae Dalton, asked very few questions during the interview. She noticed I looked exhausted and offered me a small room behind the office along with the job. I introduced myself as Elle because hearing my real name out loud still filled me with panic. For the first time in a long while, I had somewhere quiet to sleep without constantly looking over my shoulder. life at the hotel settled into a quiet routine. In the mornings, I cleaned rooms and changed sheets before travelers checked in. During evenings, I worked the front desk or helped serve coffee in the small diner beside the lobby. The work was simple, but after everything that had happened, simple felt comforting. May treated me better than I thought I deserved. She never pushed me to explain where I came from or why I looked nervous any time unfamiliar guests walked through the doors. Instead, she gave me space and kindness without asking for anything in return. Some nights after work, we sat outside near the flickering motel sign while she talked about old movies, bad weather, or stories from her younger years. Slowly, being around her made me feel human again. For a long time, I had lived in survival mode. I stopped thinking about the future because surviving each day already felt exhausting. But little pieces of myself started returning. I laughed sometimes without forcing it. I slept through the night more often. I even began reading books again during slow shifts at the front desk. Still, the past never fully left me alone. In my small room behind the office, I kept an old box hidden beneath the bed. Inside were a few photographs I had managed to save before my life collapsed. Pictures of my parents standing outside the lodge during winter storms. Old birthday cards written in my mother's handwriting. Tiny reminders that my old life had once been real. There were nights I stared at those photos for hours wondering how Bryn convinced everyone so easily. I couldn't understand why nobody questioned the story. Not one old friend searched harder. Not one neighbor doubted her. That hurt more deeply than I wanted to admit. Even after building a quieter life, part of me still felt stuck between two worlds. I was alive, but the person I used to be remained buried somewhere back in Colorado beside an empty grave with my name on it. One quiet afternoon, the diner was nearly empty except for a few travelers escaping the desert heat. I was carrying coffee to a corner table when I noticed an older woman watching me closely. At first, I thought maybe I had forgotten part of her order, but her expression looked different. She seemed stunned, almost frightened. I set the coffee down, and she grabbed my wrist gently before I could walk away. "Excuse me," she said softly, still staring at my face. "What did you say your name was?" My heart immediately started racing. I had trained myself to stay calm whenever strangers asked personal questions, but something about her voice made me nervous. I quietly answered, "Elle." She didn't believe me. The woman introduced herself as Odessa Vale. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that made people listen without raising her voice. She kept studying my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle she never expected to see again. A few minutes later, she asked if we could speak privately outside near the parking lot. I almost refused, but curiosity stopped me. Once we stepped outside, Odessa slowly mentioned Bryn's name. The sound of my sister's name after so long made my stomach drop. Odessa explained that her grandson, Cade Mercer, had been engaged to Bryn for over a year. She said she clearly remembered seeing a family photo during a dinner at Cade's house. In that picture, Bryn stood beside another woman who looked exactly like me. Then Odessa said the sentence that nearly took the air from my lungs. Bryn told everyone her sister died. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could see realization spreading across her face piece by piece. She understood before I even explained anything further. The sadness in her eyes changed into anger. Not toward me, but toward Bryn. Odessa finally whispered, "That woman buried you while you were still alive." And for the first time since my life fell apart, someone finally believed me without questioning a single word. After that conversation, Odessa stopped treating me like a stranger passing through town. She came back to the hotel the next morning with a folder, a notebook, and a level of determination I hadn't seen in anyone for a very long time. She told me Bryn had fooled too many people already and that she had no intention of letting the lie continue. At first, I was terrified to get involved. Part of me still believed Bryn would somehow find a way to destroy me again. But Odessa kept pushing gently, reminding me that hiding forever would only protect the person who hurt me. We started collecting anything connected to my old life. I searched through forgotten emails, old photographs, and paperwork I still remembered from the lodge. Odessa used her connections to quietly request public records and financial documents connected to Bryn. What we uncovered made me sick. Large amounts of money from my parents' accounts had been moved shortly after the accident. Signatures appeared on legal forms I had never seen before. Some documents claimed I willingly gave Bryn full authority over the lodge while recovering from severe mental health problems. I knew immediately the signatures were fake. Then we discovered something even worse. Bryn had secretly sold part of the land behind the lodge months earlier to a private investor. The money from the sale never appeared in the business records. It went directly into accounts connected to Bryn alone. Odessa also learned Bryn had built a completely false image around my supposed death. She told Kate's family emotional stories about losing her younger sister and acted like she carried endless grief. Kate's relatives admired her for being strong after tragedy, and Bryn used that sympathy to move deeper into their wealthy social circle. The more evidence we gathered, the more clearly I saw the truth. Bryn didn't just want control of the lodge. She wanted admiration, money, status, and attention. My disappearance had become the perfect tool to help her create the life she always believed she deserved. And now, for the first time, cracks were finally starting to show in the story she built. Odessa didn't say much about her plan. She only told me to be ready and dressed properly. I didn't ask questions because I could tell something important was about to happen. That evening, she brought a simple dress for me and arranged transport herself. We drove for hours until the city lights appeared in the distance. I didn't recognize the place at first, but the atmosphere quickly made it clear. Wealth, elegance, and silence surrounded the venue we stopped in front of. Security stood at the entrance, and guests were arriving in expensive cars. Odessa spoke calmly before we went in. She told me I didn't need to fight or explain anything immediately. I just needed to stand there and let the truth speak on its own. Inside, the ballroom was bright and full of people dressed like they belonged to another world. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling, and soft music played while waiters moved through the crowd. I stayed close to Odessa as we entered, trying to keep my breathing steady. Then I saw Bryn. She was standing near the front, completely comfortable, holding everyone's attention like she owned the room. Kate was beside her, smiling proudly as she spoke about loss, strength, and how family tragedy had shaped her life. People listened closely, some even looking emotional. I felt something tighten inside me. Odessa gave me a small nod. I walked forward. At first, no one noticed me. Then a few guests turned their heads. Conversation slowed. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. One by one, faces shifted from confusion to shock. Bryn's voice stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes met mine. For a second, she didn't move. It was like she couldn't process what she was seeing. Then her hand slipped, and the champagne glass in her grip shattered on the floor. The room fell completely silent as every person turned toward me, standing there alive in front of the woman who had already told them I no longer existed. For a moment, Bryn tried to recover like nothing had happened. She forced a nervous laugh and stepped forward, acting like she was in control of the situation. Her voice shook a little, but she quickly started telling people I was confused, that I had been missing for a long time and didn't understand reality anymore. A few guests looked uncertain at first, but Odessa didn't let her continue. She calmly walked forward and placed a folder on a nearby table. Inside were printed records, signatures, and bank transfers that had been collected over the past weeks. The room shifted instantly. People leaned in to read. Whispering started spreading through the crowd. Cade stepped closer and picked up the papers himself. The more he read, the more his expression changed. Confusion turned into disbelief and then anger. Bryn tried to stop him, reaching for his arm and insisting it was all fake, but he pulled away. Her voice got louder, more desperate, as she tried to explain everything in rushed sentences that didn't connect properly. Odessa then spoke clearly in front of everyone. She explained how assets had been moved without permission, how signatures didn't match official records, and how Bryn had built a false story around my disappearance to gain sympathy and financial control. That was enough. Kate stepped back from her completely. Around the room, conversation stopped. Some guests began quietly leaving without saying a word. Others just stood there in silence, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Then police officers entered the venue with calm authority. Odessa had contacted them earlier that day after confirming the final set of documents. Bryn froze when she saw them approach. Her confidence finally disappeared. For the first time, she wasn't in control of the story anymore. Everything she had built around lies, sympathy, and stolen trust was breaking apart in front of everyone who once admired her. After the night at the engagement party, everything moved quickly. Officials began going through every document tied to Bryn's name. What they uncovered painted a clear picture of how carefully she had built her lies. Nothing was random. Every step had been planned to keep control over money, property, and people's trust. Medical records that were supposed to confirm my death were found to be edited and submitted under false authority. The hospital files didn't match the original reports, and the signatures on key forms didn't belong to any verified doctor. Once those details were checked, the entire story she told the town started collapsing. Bank accounts connected to my family's inheritance were also traced. Large transfers had been made over time, slowly draining what was left behind after my parents. Bryn had spread the money across different accounts to avoid attention, but investigators were able to connect the movement back to her. People who once worked for the lodge were questioned next. A few admitted they had been pressured to sign papers they didn't fully understand. Some said they were paid to stay quiet, while others were told they would lose their jobs if they asked too many questions. As the truth spread, Bryn's reputation disappeared almost overnight. Kate ended their engagement immediately, cutting all ties once he realized how deeply he had been misled. The lodge was placed under legal protection while ownership disputes were reviewed. Bryn eventually faced multiple charges related to fraud, identity manipulation, and financial theft. The confidence she once carried completely broke down as she realized there was no way to explain her actions anymore. Back in my hometown, people reacted with shock and guilt. Many of them admitted they never questioned what they were told. They believed the story too easily and never looked deeper. That realization left a heavy silence behind, one that couldn't be fixed with apologies or excuses. Months passed before I was able to go back to the place I once called home. The road felt longer than I remembered, like every mile carried memories I had tried hard to avoid. When the lodge finally came into view, it looked older and quieter, but still standing strong against the cold wind. May came with me without asking questions. She simply said she wasn't going to let me face everything alone. Odessa also stayed close, helping with paperwork and legal steps that were still unfinished. Together, we began sorting through what was left, one room at a time. Some parts of the lodge were damaged and needed repair. Other areas had been left untouched for too long. Cleaning it felt strange at first, almost like I was stepping into someone else's life. But slowly, the place started to feel familiar again, not as something I lost, but something I was taking back piece by piece. There were difficult moments. Certain rooms reminded me of everything that happened, and I had to pause more than once just to breathe and keep going. Still, I didn't stop. May often worked beside me, turning silence into small conversations that kept me grounded. Odessa handled most of the remaining legal matters until ownership was fully restored. Once everything was finally settled, the lodge was officially back under my name. I didn't rush to celebrate. I just stood there and let it sink in. One evening, I stepped outside onto the porch while snow slowly covered the ground. The air was cold, but peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. Looking at the land my parents once built, I realized something simple but powerful. I didn't win by destroying anyone. I didn't need revenge to feel whole again. What mattered was that I was still here, still standing, and no longer living inside someone else's lie. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away, or should I have trusted them again? I'd really like to know your thoughts in the comments. If you want more stories like mine, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything.